Hello and welcome to another episode of Coach and Coffee. I hope you've got your coffee with you right now. Today we're going to go over a topic that people are hopefully not going to find controversial, because it's not. I'm just going to tell you the truth, which is what I always try to do. First, my shirt here says "That's inaccurate." My wife got this for me as an anniversary present, and I imagine it was partly a joke and partly a little jab at me, and I'm okay with that. I think it's funny. It's also a very comfortable shirt, very comfortable material. Black's not the greatest color to be wearing in the hot sunlight out here, because it absorbs the heat and makes it feel a little hotter, but oh well. Alright, today we are talking about CrossFit in conjunction with OCR. So if you're an OCR athlete, is it worth it for you to do CrossFit? There are a lot of OCR athletes out there who do CrossFit as their primary training, as their primary exercise, and there are a lot out there who also do it as supplementary work. So I'll just give you a very basic example. So Ryan Woods is one of the better OCR athletes out there. He won the North American Championship last year. He's been phenomenal for years running now. Phenomenal athlete, and according to him in multiple interviews, he said that he took up CrossFit once or twice a week. I think he said twice a week, to try and quote him as closely as I can and be as accurate as I can, to get a little bit stronger, because he came from pretty much a purely running background, and he needed to get stronger so he wasn't failing obstacles or struggling with obstacles like the tire flip and some of the heavy carries and things like that. So there are athletes doing it as supplementary work. It's not their main focus, and there are athletes who are doing CrossFit as their main training in OCR. I guess the question here to ask in particular is, what are your goals in OCR? And I always start out by asking that question because it's the most important question, and the answer changes based on your goal. So if your goal in OCR is to do well, to be fit, to be strong, to just run a good race, do it in a good time, just be a good overall athlete in the sport, you can do it with CrossFit. Now, the question is, can you have CrossFit be your main training routine and still be one of the top OCR athletes, if that's your goal? If your goal isn't to be a top OCR athlete, like I just mentioned, you'll be good. You'll be in good shape and everything. But if you want to be a top competitor in age group, but especially if you want to be a top competitor in the elite or pro categories, then will CrossFit as a main training program or training type be the best option for you? My answer to that, and I believe all of the data supports that, and that's where I get this answer from. It's not opinion based, it's data based and results based. The answer would be no. And that is not a black mark on CrossFit. The reality is that CrossFit is not OCR. While they intermix on certain things, while CrossFit can build up great strength and endurance and like grip strength and all sorts of technical skills for OCR, you do a lot of burpees, and if you fail an obstacle at Spartan Race, it's helpful to be good at burpees. Just that's one example. While it can do all of those things, they are not the same thing. They're different sports. There's the CrossFit Games and there's OCR, and there's a reason for that. In OCR, you are never required to clean and jerk a 400-pound weight, but you are in the CrossFit Games. And this goes back a little bit to one of our older videos with training specificity. If you want to be great at OCR, the reality is that the majority of obstacle course racing requires running. Even if it's a short course, at most races, I know there are some that are extremely obstacle dense, or have extreme obstacle density, where there's an obstacle in a very short period of time, and it's a short course. But for most races, it's spread out over the course of several miles, and so the majority of time spent is running, and the majority of the race in general is running. So in CrossFit they do running, and it's great that they do. They're incorporating another aspect of fitness into the routine, but the emphasis is not based on running, and that's fine because it's CrossFit, not OCR. Excuse me. That's better. And so since it's not your area of focus, it's not your training specificity, then you're only going to get so good at running if you're running 3-4 miles a week in your training. Now, I have yet to find, and maybe it's too soon right now, but I've yet to see a CrossFit athlete who does CrossFit, let's say most of the time, like 4 or 5 days a week, but also does a significant volume of running, and as a result is one of the top athletes. I haven't seen it yet. I can't think of a single example for it. You know, I think a lot of people, if someone was to argue with me on this topic, which you have every right to argue with me and disagree if you want to, I'm happy to have that discussion. I think most people would point out Hunter McIntyre because he was he was so young, I guess, essentially, and so inexperienced in the sport, but he came on so suddenly and was so consistent and good in the sport. But I think the most important thing to consider there is Echo, no. Just trying to eat a bunch of junk. The most important thing to consider there is that he was not a top top CrossFit athlete when he initially started, and to my understanding it was not his main training source, and it certainly wasn't after he had been in OCR and started becoming competitive. He switched sports, and now I'm sure, you know what, I'm no doubt if he took on an obstacle course today, he would be better than 95+% of athletes out there. He's a beast. He works hard, trains hard. He's great, but I don't for a second believe he would beat some of the top OCR specific athletes out there because he trains for something different, and that is fine. But as long as your goal is to be great at OCR, I personally would not recommend CrossFit as a primary training regimen. If you want to get stronger, if you want to build more strength, endurance, all of those things, then CrossFit can be a great supplement when done properly. There are a lot of issues with it, and there are a lot of positives to it. Almost all of the issues with CrossFit come with poor programming or poor instruction. Essentially that comes down to bad coaches. So as long as you have a good coach who's teaching it properly and programming it properly, you're going to be in great hands, you're going to make tons of progress, and that's the case with all sports. If you have a bad coach, things aren't going to go well. If you have a good coach, things are probably going to go well. As long as you're putting in the work, you'll be fine. On the whole, what is your goal? If your goal is to be great at OCR, you need to train for OCR. That means you have to be good at heavy carries. That means you have to have really great grip strength. You have to be good at strategy, and you have to be good at running. That's pretty much what it comes down to. You need to have those 4 pieces, and you will be a very good OCR athlete. CrossFit makes you really strong, really powerful. You do have great endurance muscularly, but that doesn't make you a great runner. And if you're not a great runner, you will not be a top competitor in OCR. So it just depends on your goal. A lot of athletes are phenomenal with CrossFit. A lot of athletes in OCR, virtually all of the top athletes in OCR are not training CrossFit as their primary means. That's just true. It's just a reality. If you want to fight me on it, like I said, let's have it out. It's not controversial. There's no real argument here. But you know, people see athletes doing CrossFit for OCR, and so they're like, well, if I want to be a top OCR athlete, that one's really good, and so I should do that. But really, you got to take a look at who's doing the best and what are they doing, because whatever they're doing is probably what you should be doing on a smaller scale and building up to their level. I think that about covers it for today. CrossFit is not the best training regimen for being great at OCR. You will be a very good athlete, you will not be the top athlete, and that is based on current results and data. I will see you next time on Coach and Coffee.